I built that ranch with my bare hands. 31 years. Every fence post, every water line, every inch of that land. I bled for it. My late wife Margaret and I raised our son there. We buried 2 dogs there. We scattered her ashes near the old oak tree by the east pasture when she passed. And on a Tuesday morning in October, my daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eyes, pointed toward the gate, and said, "This isn't your home anymore, Dale. You need to leave." She was standing in my kitchen, drinking coffee from my pot. By noon that same day, I had already made a phone call that would change everything for all of us.
My name is Dale. I'm 63 years old. I lived, on a 340-acre cattle ranch in central Texas that my father started and I finished building. When my dad passed in 1987, he left me the land and about 40 head of cattle, a broken-down barn, and a whole lot of pride. I spent the next 3 decades turning that into something real. By the time I was 50, we had over 200 head of Angus cattle, a fully operational hay operation, a small guest cabin we rented out seasonally, and a main house that Margaret decorated so beautifully it looked like something out of a magazine. Margaret. God, I miss that woman. She passed 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer. Went fast, faster than either of us expected. One day she was making biscuits and talking about redoing the back porch. 6 months later, I was standing at her grave wondering how to breathe. Our son, Cody, was devastated. He and Margaret were close in a way that only a mother and her only child can be. He flew home from Dallas, stayed for a month, then went back to his life. That's when he met Brianna. Now look, I want to be fair here. When Cody first brought Brianna home to meet me, I tried. I genuinely tried. She was attractive, well-dressed, confident. Worked in real estate. Drove a car that cost more than most people's first homes. I shook her hand. I cooked a nice dinner. I showed her around the property. And she looked at my land, the way a person looks at something they're calculating the value of. Not appreciating it. Appraising it. I noticed it. But I told myself I was being an overprotective father. A grieving widower who wasn't ready to see his son move on. I pushed the feeling down. 6 months later, Cody and Brianna were engaged. The wedding was fine. Simple ceremony. I paid for most of it because Cody asked me to, and I said yes because that's what fathers do. The trouble started small. It always does. First it was comments. Little ones. Brianna would walk through the main house and say things like, "This layout is so dated. You could really open this up if you knocked out that wall." Or she'd look at my equipment and say, "Don't you think it's time to modernize? This operation could run so much leaner." I'm a patient man. I let it go. Then about a year into their marriage, Cody came to me with a proposal. He said he and Brianna had been talking, and they thought it would make sense for the 2 of them to move onto the ranch permanently. Help me run things. Take some of the burden off my shoulders. I want to be honest, part of me was relieved. I was 60 at the time. The work was getting harder. My knees weren't what they used to be. And truthfully, the idea of having Cody close again, having a family around that house, it felt like something Margaret would have wanted. So I said yes. I had a small guest suite in the east wing of the house. Perfectly nice. Private bathroom, its own entrance. I told them they could have that, and we'd share the common spaces. That wasn't enough for Brianna. Within 2 weeks of them moving in, she had redecorated the living room without asking me. Margaret's curtains, gone. Margaret's china cabinet, moved to the garage. The family photos on the wall? Replaced with some kind of abstract canvas prints she'd ordered online. I came downstairs one morning and for a second, I didn't recognize my own home. I talked to Cody about it. Privately, calmly, man to man. I said, "Son, I understand she wants to make the space feel like hers, but this is still my house. Some of those things belong to your mother." Cody looked uncomfortable. he said. Dad, Brianna just has a different style. She didn't mean anything by it. That was the first time I noticed something that scared me more than the decorating. Cody was different. The way he avoided my eyes when he said it. The way he rushed through the conversation like he was reading from a script someone else had written. My son, who used to argue with me for hours about cattle prices and football, suddenly couldn't hold a conversation with me that lasted more than 3 minutes. But what happened a few months later, that was when I knew something was really wrong. I had a buddy named Frank, known him 30 years, he's a ranch hand and one of the most honest men I've ever met. He came to me one afternoon looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. He said, Dale, I don't want to get in your family's business. But I think you need to know something. He told me that Brianna had been meeting with a real estate developer. Twice. On my property. While I was in town running errands. She had walked this developer, some guy in a clean polo shirt who Frank said wouldn't have lasted 20 minutes doing actual ranch work, across the east pasture, along the creek line, up to the ridge. Showing him the land like she owned it. Frank overheard part of the conversation. The developer said something about, once the transfer is complete, and Brianna said something about, working on the timeline. I sat with that information for 3 days before I said anything. I needed to think clearly. I needed to understand what I was actually dealing with. Because here's something I hadn't mentioned yet. About 8 months after Cody and Brianna moved in, Cody came to me with some paperwork. He said Brianna had an attorney friend who suggested that for tax and estate planning purposes, it made sense to put both of their names on the ranch's operational accounts. Just the accounts, not the deed itself, he said. Just to streamline things while they were helping run the operation. I should have said no. But Cody was my son. And I was lonely. And I was tired. And I thought I was being paranoid. I signed the paperwork. I didn't read it carefully enough. When I finally sat down with my own attorney, a woman named Patricia who I'd used for years, and explained everything Frank had told me, Patricia pulled up the documents. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Dale, this isn't just operational account access. This language here, it gives Brianna signatory authority over ranch-related financial decisions. Combined with Cody being your heir and this clause here about joint operational control during your lifetime. She turned the papers toward me. She's been building a legal argument that she has a right to direct how this property is used. I felt the blood drain out of my face. I drove home in silence. Pulled up to my own driveway. Looked at the house my father built, the house I finished, and I felt something I hadn't felt since Margaret died. Completely alone. But then I walked inside. And Brianna was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and her coffee cup like she owned the place. She looked up at me with this expression, barely even registered I'd walked in, and said, Oh, Dale. I've been meaning to talk to you. Cody and I have been discussing the future of the property. We think it might be time to start transitioning the operation. And honestly, you might be more comfortable somewhere smaller. A retirement community, maybe. This place is a lot for one older person. I just stared at her. She kept going. Said something about how she and Cody needed space to build their own life. That it wasn't healthy for me to be so attached to the property at my age. That she'd already looked at some lovely independent living options nearby. Then she said it. This isn't really your home anymore, Dale. Maybe it's time you leave. In my kitchen. To my face. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I looked at her for a long moment, and then I walked upstairs to my office. And I called Patricia. I'm not going to pretend I was stone cold. I sat in that office chair and I put my head in my hands and I cried. Not because I was weak. But because I was grieving, again. Grieving my wife, and now grieving the version of my son I thought I knew. I kept asking myself how I had missed it. How I had been so willing to believe the best in people that I handed them the very tools they needed to take everything from me. I thought about Margaret. She never trusted Brianna. She said it once, quietly, after Cody first introduced them. She said, Dale, watch that girl's eyes. She doesn't look at people. She looks at what they have. I had told her she was just being a protective mama bear. God, she was right. I also thought about Cody. My boy. And that's the part that hurt most. Because I could see that Brianna had spent years quietly isolating him. From me, from his instincts, from the person he was raised to be. That doesn't happen overnight. It's slow. It's calculated. And it works on good men especially, because good men want peace. I wasn't just angry at Brianna. I was heartbroken for my son. But I also knew this: heartbreak doesn't protect your legacy. Action does. Patricia had been thorough. Bless that woman. Here's what she found. Yes, Brianna had secured some signatory authority through that paperwork. But, and this was critical, the deed to the ranch was still solely in my name. The land was mine. Entirely mine. No joint tenancy, no shared title, nothing. Which meant I could still sell it. Legally. That day. If I wanted to. And I had options. Because about 2 years before any of this started, a land conservation trust had contacted me about purchasing a preservation easement on part of the ranch. I'd been on the fence. Didn't want to give up control. But I also remembered they had mentioned a full purchase option if I ever decided to sell. They wanted the land preserved, no development, cattle grazing allowed, natural habitat maintained. Everything I would have wanted. I called them before lunch. The trust director remembered me immediately. We had a 2-hour conversation. By the time it was over, we had agreed on terms. Not a rush sale, a fair one. A good one. One that protected the land from ever being turned into what Brianna was planning to turn it into. I also called my estate attorney and had him begin restructuring my will. The operational accounts Brianna had access to? Patricia found a clean, legal way to revoke that authority given the fraudulent misrepresentation during the signing. She documented everything. And then, this is the part one wants you to understand, I didn't sneak around. I didn't scheme in secret while pretending everything was fine. I sat Cody down. Just the two of us. Out on the porch, looking at the land. I laid out everything. The meetings with the developer. The legal documents. What Patricia had found. All of it. And I watched my son, my boy, go through 5 different emotions in about 4 minutes. He started defensive. Then confused. Then I showed him the documents, and he went quiet. And then something shifted in his face. Like a man waking up. He put his elbows on his knees and stared at the ground for a long time. Then he said, "Dad, I'm so sorry." That was enough. For now, that was enough. The sale closed 3 weeks later. Brianna didn't know until the morning I handed the keys to the trust's representative. She came downstairs to find strangers on the porch with paperwork, and the look on her face. I won't lie, there was a part of me that felt something close to peace in that moment. She turned to me and said, "What did you do?" I said, "I sold my ranch. To people who'll take care of it." She immediately called her attorney. Argued that she had signatory authority, that she had a stake in the operation, that the sale couldn't be valid. Her attorney apparently told her what Patricia had already confirmed: the deed was mine alone. The signatory authority was operational, not ownership. And since that authority had been obtained through misrepresentation, it had already been legally revoked. She had nothing. The real estate developer she'd been secretly meeting with called her to confirm the deal she'd been promising him. That land was now protected by a conservation trust, no development, ever. Her commission, her plan, her careful little timeline? Gone. The revised will was already done. Any future inheritance was restructured into a trust administered by Patricia, with specific protections ensuring Brianna could never access or influence it, even as Cody's spouse, without court oversight. And Cody? He and Brianna separated 4 months after that morning on the porch. He called me from Dallas one evening, said he'd been in therapy, said he'd been slowly understanding for months just how much had been manipulated. He wasn't making excuses. He was just honest. We talked for 2 hours that night. About his mom. About the ranch. About what it means to protect something. He asked me if I regretted selling. I told him the truth. I said, "I didn't sell the land, son. I saved it. There's a difference. I live on 12 acres now. Smaller place, just east of the original property. I can still see the ridge line from my back porch on a clear morning. The Angus cattle are gone, but I keep 3 horses. It's enough. Sometimes I drive out to the old oak tree. The trust allows access for family visits, and I sit near the place where Margaret's ashes are scattered. I tell her what happened. I like to think she already knew. She was right about Brianna. She was right about watching a person's eyes. She was also right about Cody. She always said he was a good man who needed to find his own footing. He's finding it now. Here's what I want to leave you with, because I think about this a lot on quiet mornings. The people who try to take what you've built, they're counting on your kindness. They weaponize your trust and your love and your desire for peace. They move slow and patient, and they make you feel like protecting yourself is somehow selfish. It isn't. There is nothing selfish about protecting what you bled for. There is nothing cold about being clear-eyed. And there is no loyalty owed to someone who was never loyal to you. I built that ranch for 31 years. She thought she could take it in 3. She forgot one thing. I had the deed. If this story hit close to home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've ever had to protect something you built, drop it in the comments. I read every one. See you next time.